So the commercial risks, we've covered off a few of these already in the previous videos. One of the main ones that people worry about in the cloud is security. If you are relying entirely on a third-party provider to provide your IT services, and all of your data's in their data center, in their cloud platform, it's entirely incumbent on them to protect you from external cyber attack and those sorts of things. And so it makes it very difficult to manage because you've got no control over what that cloud provider does. And from a procurement perspective, you need to make sure that you are very, very robust about making sure that that cloud provider delivers the security services that you expect to protect your data. This gets very contractual very quickly. And one of the things you'll find about, again, another sort of commercial risk is that you don't have much leeway to negotiate terms with the big cloud providers. Their whole model is based on a common shared service. So getting them to deliver bespoke services to you based on, what your specific requirements are isn't going to happen. And in the same way, their legal constructs, their contractual constructs are common across all customers. So you've got very little control over what changes that you want them to make to the service. Now, that in itself is a commercial risk, but then if you extend it out to the cyber protections offered by a cloud provider, they might not do what you want them to do. They might not be penetration testing their services. And if you need penetration testing for your service to protect yourself, then actually you're going to need to think about whether you really should use that cloud provider or not. Now, clearly, some of the bigger providers have got excellent security, but it's not been unknown for cloud providers to be hacked. And I think, as a procurement professional, it's your job to make sure that you've got a really clear view of what security layers you expect your IT department expect from that cloud provider, and make sure that the cloud provider delivers on those minimum standards for what security is required. Similar sort of point, data privacy. Now, clearly, GDPR is a massive topic as a procurement professional if you're in IT. And for those of you unfamiliar with it, it's data privacy regulation that's been in for a couple of decades now that says that you aren't allowed to move data without someone's permission to different geographies, and make sure you protect personal data particularly well. Now, GDPR and other data regulations are really stringent about what you do with people's data. Cloud providers, all of whom understand GDPR, some of their models mean that they have to move data from one geography to another. For instance, if you're buying a cloud provider or buying from a cloud provider who's got an offshore support center, then that offshore support center, which could be in India or Asia, will have access potentially to your data. And so you need to be really careful about how you define the boundaries of which data can be seen by which geographies, and therefore make sure you're conforming to any data regulation or data privacy legislation that you as a business need to adhere to. But also, if your clients have specific requirements, such as in the defense industry, you need to make sure that you're cognizant of what they're doing as well. So security and data are probably the two biggest risks that commercially manifest themselves in cloud platforms. Some of the sort of less thought about risks, you can get very dependent on cloud providers very quickly. Now, dependency risk in a supplier from a procurement perspective is quite a big topic. But if you, for instance, move all of your services to a cloud provider like AWS or Azure, and then they decide they're going to put their prices up by 20%, which they have done in the past, then you just have to pay it. You don't have the ability to do much about it, because moving out of that cloud provider can be complex technically and operationally, and also, might actually be impossible in some cases. So you need to make sure that you've got a really clear view on what your exit strategy is if something horrible happens to that cloud provider or they do something that you don't like. And so dependency on a supplier and managing that risk is really important. A couple of other little things that are worth bearing in mind. Cloud platforms, to stay current, do automatic updates. Now, I know that sounds good, and it is a good thing in some cases. You don't have to do it yourself. It also means that any software that you've got running on a cloud provider's platform will have to cater for those updates. So technically and operationally, if the cloud provider decides they're going to roll out the latest version of Microsoft Windows, your application, this is a really bad example, your application will have to cater for those changes. And, admittedly, the cloud providers will typically give you notice, but they will, because they're running a standard service, in most cases mandate that they update those services in line with vendor policies. So you've got very little control over what's going on in the environment and what's going on with the broader estate, and making sure that your technology and your design supports all those changes is really important. The final and biggest commercial risk, and I keep going on about it, is cost predictability. If you are buying on a consumption-based model, you are going to end up paying for what you use. Ta-da! But fundamentally, you can't predict that. And as a procurement professional, your job is to really control the outlay and the commercials around the services that you're buying into. But if someone in your IT department spins up a new virtual server in a cloud provider's platform, it's paid for by the hour, and they leave it on for weeks and weeks and weeks without you knowing about it, you will end up with a bill of thousands of pounds. So I think it's really important to make sure that you work with your IT provider and your IT department to design processes to make sure that they're monitoring their own usage, and that predictability of the cost in terms of forecasting and checking it every day, week, month, whatever you think is appropriate, will protect your business from any ridiculous costs as a result of accidents or mistakes that do happen, but are something you want to design out.